Hi, everyone, and welcome to season 5 of Parent Talk, everything parenting and more. I'm your host, Genevieve Carl, the 5, mom of 2, and I'm, of course, with my co-host, Becca Lewis. Hi, Becca.
Hi, everyone. I'm Becca, the co-host of Parent Talk and also a mom of 2. We're excited for another opportunity to learn and grow with our children today. So let's welcome another wonderful guest to help us do that.
Yes. So today, it's actually a topic that I found myself needing education on, specifically with what's happening in the world right now. So today, we're talking about how to talk about war with your children with Laura Linn Knight. Laura is a parent educator. She's an author of the upcoming book, Break Free from Reactive Parenting, and she's a former elementary teacher. She is a certified positive discipline educator and a meditation teacher who specializes in helping parents, teachers, and kids create more calm in the home. Laura was just interviewed on this topic on NBC on the Today Show, and she's also prepared. She also appeared on A Good Day, Alley, Great Day Washington, Pure Raw, Mardalee, and across various different outlets. So now we're lucky to have us with us on Parent Talk Podcast. So hi, Laura, and welcome to Parent Talk Podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here and to be talking about such an important topic today with your audience.
Awesome. Well, let's do it. So first question, and I'm sure a lot of people are actually thinking about that question. I'm sure a lot of people want to ask you this question. So how can we help our children make sense of what we can even actually make sense? Like we can even wrap our own mind around what's happening in the world right now with the Ukraine-Russia conflict.
Absolutely. It is so hard, like you said, for us to understand as adults what's going on. And so for a child, we as adults need to remember that their critical thinking brain is still really just developing. So if we just take a step back and we think about the mind, we have the lower part of our brain, and then we have this upper part of our brain, which is the prefrontal cortex. And the prefrontal cortex is really in charge of like emotional regulation and all those critical thinking skills. And so that doesn't fully develop in a child until the age of 25. So not only is this just a huge topic for children, but do they even have the capacity, right, to really wrap their minds around it? So I don't know that the question of how can we make our child understand war is the question we want to ask, right? Because it's not something we even really want to understand, but we do want to be asking, how can we support our children during this war? Because they're hearing things, we're having feelings about it. And so we want to support not only ourselves, but them too during this very stressful time.
Absolutely. I think, it's hard to avoid, even if you're trying to protect your kids. They'll overhear it from somebody. I know, like, my husband and I listen to news radio, and one of my boys is still in preschool age. He just turned 5, so he's starting kindergarten soon. But what would you recommend? Would you talk to a preschooler about war? Do you think they're too young? Should we try to shield them? Like, when he asked, I just kind of like paused and came up with the most age-appropriate response that I could.
Yeah.
What would you do?
It's a great question. And, so my daughter's a little bit older, she's 7, but when she heard about war, her immediate thoughts, because we just moved, we lived in California and we moved to Arizona. So in her brain, it was like, there's a war. What will we do? Will we move out of Arizona and go back to California where it will be safe? Right. So really trying to explain, like, this isn't happening here. This is happening somewhere else in the world, and you are safe and you are with your family. And so because she had heard it, then of course I want to support her in that conversation. And I want to reassure her that she is safe that we are here for her, that it's not something that she needs to necessarily worry about. But as she hears information trickle down, she has an older brother who's 9, so he's hearing more at school. The conversation can be, how do we support people that are affected by the war? That's not her, but there are other children, there are other people. How can we offer support? And that can take away some of their fear too, because they feel like they're giving, there's an empowerment piece there. Now, would I actually bring it up with my preschooler if they didn't have older siblings, if they weren't hearing it on the news? I wouldn't sit down with my preschooler and have the conversation. But as a parent, I think it's good to be prepared and to be curious with them, with all kids, of, kind of, what are you hearing at school? How is your day? Just being more attuned to kind of what might be coming up for them, because they're going to be hearing stuff for sure, even if it's not from us directly.
Mm-hmm. So now I would like to talk about different age levels. So you did mention your daughter's 7, your son is 9.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously there's a different approach. So how do we start the conversation? I have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. So as you say, my kids are really young, and I'm understanding there's no point starting the conversation if they haven't been exposed to it. But I'm sure parents out there has different age group children. So how can you help us like navigating that?
Absolutely. So what we do in our family always is we have family meetings as part of our family routine. And part of our family meeting is where we sit down as a family once a week and we say, okay, what's coming up? What's either coming up at home that we need to kind of problem solve and work together, or what's going on at school. We also have a daily routine in our home where we say, what's your rose? That's something positive that happened. What's your bud? That's something you're looking forward to. And what's your thorn? That's something bad that's happened. So we have this set in place so that when big life events come up, our children are really used to having bigger conversations and check-ins with us. So when my son heard about this, he already knew, okay, family meeting time, rosebud thorn time. I kind of have these routines set in place. These are times when I can talk to mom and dad about what's going on. Now, by default, then my younger hears about it, right? So that opens her up to the conversation like we just talked about. So what I tell parents, really for all ages, kind of, I would say like first grade and up, and this includes the tweens and the teens, is being curious with your child. So what have you been hearing at school about Ukraine and Russia? Are you hearing anything at school? How does it make you feel when you do hear about these things? What are your friends saying? And so really trying to gather some information before we impose kind of our opinion, or maybe oversharing or sharing facts that they don't need to know yet. It's just a good idea to kind of gauge where your child's at before you jump into any conversation.
I think that's a really great approach. So gather that information. Should we always let them bring it up? Is that something that, if your child hasn't brought it up, should we bring it up at all? Or should we just leave it until it comes up naturally? Or, they suddenly go, Mommy, I want to ask you something.
Yes.
What's kind of better if it's been weeks and you think they've heard something, but they haven't said anything?
For older children, I think being curious and asking them is important, because at this point, there's so much going on social media. It's on the news. They're talking about it in school. So I think being curious, and even just to the point of, there's a lot going on in Ukraine right now. Have you heard anything? That's a very simple question. No, I haven't heard anything. Maybe you as a parent want to give them a little bit of information and share some facts with them. And talk to them about, okay, well, there's a war going on in Ukraine, and let's look at a map, and let's look at where Ukraine is, and let's talk about Russia, and just sharing some basic information with them so that when they do hear something at school or from friends, they're not completely caught off guard. But if it is your younger preschooler per se, I think chances are, they're not hearing it probably from their preschool friends. So just really gauging or even asking their teachers is a really good idea too, of kind of like, is this something that's being talked about at school? I know another parent, she hadn't talked about it with her child, and then her child brought it up because their teacher had talked to them about it. And so the parent was kind of caught off guard of like, oh, okay, you're having this conversation at school. And so that's where the homeschool connection is really important, so that we can kind of all be on the same page. Just because, with such a sensitive topic and something that we said in the beginning where we can't wrap our heads around it, we really want to create an atmosphere of safety at home where our children know that they can ask us these questions, they can bring things up, they can talk about confusing information, and that we're going to be here to support them the best we can. And if we don't know the answer to something, we're going to go find it somewhere else, or we're going to go research with them or on our own and bring that information back to them.
Mm-hmm. And I think the question is like, now maybe they're scared now. Maybe they're scared that war will come close to us. So how can we address their fear, and how can you make them feel safe and secure if they're scared?
Yes. And that was one of the questions that my son had right away is what is this war? Are we going to have to fight in the war? What does that mean? I was surprised, actually. I was kind of taken aback, like, oh, you're already kind of thinking there as a 9-year-old. And so it's a really valid question. And when it comes to fear in children, always just focusing on the here and now. That's a lot as what I do as a meditation teacher for children. And I work with a lot of children that have fear. And it's just kind of coming back to the present moment, whatever the fear is, even when it's something this big, of kind of like, well, what's happening right now? I hear that you're scared. I know that that's a future worry of yours, but what's happening in this moment? In this moment, we're in our home and we are safe. And we're really grateful that we can be safe today. How can we help those that are not feeling safe in their home? My kids have a candle making business, and they donate 20% of their profits to organizations. My son likes to do animal rescue. My daughter likes to donate to homeless shelters. But this is a time where we're saying, okay, let's use 20% of what you've made selling your candles, and we can donate to people in Ukraine. And so I think there's opportunities for them to kind of move away from the fear into that place of giving if it's possible. And also just, again, to reassure them, here we are in this moment, and keep coming back to the moment. What do you see in your room right now? What do you feel in your body? What sounds do we hear? And just kind of resettling the brain, getting from this part back into this part really helps. And then, do that as much as you need to, which for some kids, it might be a lot. Kids have been through a lot, right? Just after all of the anxiety around COVID and what that was going to look like. And now here we are with this. So these are tools that are going to be ongoing that we should be teaching them.
Those are such great tools. And, meditation is such a great thing for kids to calm them down and settle their minds. I have kind of a funny thing. I was watching my 5-year-old. I also have a 7-year-old, but my 5-year-old was the one that asked most of the questions. And it's interesting how their little brains try to process the information. My little guy loves superheroes, and he basically was like, Russia's the bad guys, in the way like a superhero, like Marvel, that type of thing was. And like, Russians are bad guys. I'm like, no. We had to have a little bit of a distinction, like, not Russian people are bad guys. Not everyone. We're not going to generalize. This is what's happening with the government. This is what's happening on another side of the world, and have some talks about that. Now, what's your experience with that with your kids and how they're processing it? Sounds like they're so lovely that they're wanting to donate money to, efforts and supporting those there. How would you give advice to parents as they're trying to wrap their heads around it and helping their children, I guess, navigate the information that's out there?
I'm so glad that you brought this up. because it's something that I am hearing so much from families and at schools. And it's really becoming this us versus them mentality, right? And that was one of the very first things I heard too, was like, Russia's doing this and we're going to get Russia. And it's almost that superhero video game, us versus them. And this is a really important time for parents to be having that conversation and saying, people are also fleeing Russia. It's not that all Russians are in support of what's going on, and that there's a lot of pain in Russia also over this war, and that we can't generalize. And talking about, if people in your neighborhood, in your community that are Russian, and we like those people and we see those people. And it's a really important time, I think, for kids to make this distinction. They historically, they learn in school so much about in the past where there was segregation and there was racism, and we just had Black History Month. And so there's a lot of conversation of how things used to be and how we don't do that anymore, is kind of how it's talked about in school. And so here's this opportunity now to say, hey, we're not going to do what has been historically done in the past, and we don't want to generalize a group of people. And just offering, I think what you said to your child, and just was perfect, of like, hey, whoa, this isn't what we're doing. There's politics involved, there's government involved. We also talked about that in my home, and I've been saying the same thing in other interviews that I've been doing, is that this is an important time not to go into that us versus them. So thank you for bringing that up.
Mm-hmm. Now I'd like to talk about a little bit of actually our own behavior as a parent, because I feel that if I feel scared, if I feel nervous, or any emotion and we have as a parent, I feel our children feels that also. So it depends how we are even understanding what's happening. Can you talk a little bit about this? What do we do if we are creating the problem in some ways?
So much of my book, when I sat down to write my book on Break Free from Reactive Parenting, the first thing that I thought was, it starts with me. I almost wanted to name the book It Starts With You, because it does. It starts with us as parents. And if we are not able to self-regulate, and we are in a place of fear, then that feeds down to our children 100% of the time in every area. And especially when it comes to big world news and big events like this, which are really, really scary. And so the first thing for parents to consider is, when am I watching the news? When am I getting in my information? Am I doing that in front of my child? Should I do that on the way to pick them up from school? What are the appropriate times for me that I know I can sit down, I can learn, I can educate myself, but I'm also going to have enough of a buffer to calm my body and my mind down. So if I'm taking in a lot of information about what's going on in the world, then I know that I need at least 10 or 15 minutes where I can sit and I, have my meditation practice. I focus on my breathing. I get back into a state of, okay, I too am safe. It's just what we talked about with the kids, right? What do I hear? What do I see in this room? What do I hear in this space? How does my heart feel? What loving, kind reminders can I give to myself? Whatever your practice is. And I share a lot of practices on my website for parents that are interested in that. I know you'll share my website later, but really finding a place to ground, because if I don't, and I'm just listening to the news, and then I'm racing off, and then I get my kids, and then they get in the car, and let's say they say something about what's going on, or they're like, oh, Russia's bad. Me as a parent, I could very quickly be like snapping at them of like, what are you talking about? We're not, it's like, I can go there if I'm not in that calmer state. And so if I'm going to support them, just like the metaphor we always hear, it's like I put on my own oxygen mask first. And I think just being mindful of like, when am I and how am I digesting my own information that I'm sharing before I get my kids.
Mm-hmm. I also feel I have a 5, almost 6 years old, and I feel that at that age is really now able to ride my feelings or my emotions, which before not as much.
Mhm.
So do you think it's about like which age group like that starts? Because for little babies, obviously it's I mean they'll feel our emotions and stuff, but
Yeah.
to really feel it and question us on it, at what age do you think that starts?
Yeah, so you're right. I mean, babies do, we know that we have mirror neurons, and that's why when we're happy and we're smiling at our babies, and then they're going to smile back at us. And so we have that in our brain where we are definitely taking in the stimulus and the emotions of our caregivers, and we're mirroring that back to them. Now, for your child, it's really going to depend on how attuned they are. Some kids are really empathetic, some kids are very sensitive. So, depending on your child's personality, it's going to be very different. Like my 7 and my 9-year-old are probably matched. Like my 7-year-old daughter, like if I'm like, oh, my stomach kind of hurts, she's like, can I get you a blanket? Would you like water? Can I get you a snack? And my 9-year-old probably does that more now, but didn't do that at age 7. So really, I think depending on the age of your child, but definitely as you get into the elementary school years, kids are for sure picking up on your behavior, your stress, what's going on for you. And so the age of your child is probably that age where, yes, you're not going to notice it more and more from here on out, where they're really picking up on that.
Awesome. Well, I think we covered a lot today. I think that was a podcast that was absolutely needed. I needed to hear about it from an expert. I needed to know what to do, because what happened actually in my household is we're all sitting there, we're watching the news, it's on TV. It's kind of the first few days of it. And then I turn around and I said, oh, I guess there's war now. And my son looked at me and I'm like, and then my mother-in-law's there and I'm just like, I don't know if it's a good thing to say or not. Right. So I just had this moment and everybody was like, okay. My kids didn't even care. They just keep playing. But I'm like, oh my gosh, did I volunteer too much information? So if that happens to me, it happens to everyone. So thank you so much for this pieces of advice. And I think it's going to help a lot of parents out there. So Laura Linn, if we want to know more about you, I know everyone can find you on our on our panel of expert at parenttalk.ca, but where else can we find you?
You can also find me on my website. So Laura Linn, it's Linn Knight, KNIGHT.com. You can find me on social media, on Instagram at Laura Linn Knight. And I just want to say thank you so much for having me. I feel like this was a wonderful conversation, and us parents do not have to be alone. And I'm so glad that you are providing this service where parents can get useful, informative information from educators in the field and not be trying to navigate this all by, ourselves.
Yes, and not only navigating through social media. It's not always super good out there, right?
Yes, it can be hard. Right. That's a whole nother podcast.
Let's talk about this another time. Yes, absolutely. Yes, we got to watch what you're reading, find out the resources of it. Where is it from, right? Yes. Well, that concludes today's episode. Becca and I would like to thank you, Laura, for taking the time to be here and bringing so much value to all of us parents, helping us grow, because we need to grow as parents, and of course, be the best parents we can be. So for our listeners, if you have a question or you would like to join us on our show as a guest or as an expert, please visit the Contact Us section on our website at parenttalk.ca. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and now also on Parent Talk TV. Of course, you can always subscribe directly to this podcast on our website at parenttalk.ca. We hope you enjoyed today's episode, and we're inviting you to share it on your social media. And as we all know, parenting can be hard. So remember, it's important to laugh, keep learning, cherish your village, and be true to yourself. Thank you for joining us today, and have a great week. Bye.